Hi, I'm Rhonda Gaskins, broker Century 21 Lake Area Realty in the Lake Martin area. On average, our sales price are commanding a strong 96% of list price. Call me today and let me get started for you. 256-749-3644.
Hey, welcome into our Week 5 matchup preview show. I'm Lizi Arbogast with Central Alabama Voice alongside Kayla Brooks. And yeah, it's hard to believe, but we are halfway through the season, and things are moving right along. We had a great slate of games this week.
Yeah, things are moving right along, and, we're having some teams that are having to cancel because of COVID and stuff, but we're not having, major. We're not having like a whole classification having to cancel or anything like that. And I think that that's been the positive through this whole thing is it's been a few teams, but for the most part, we're making through this thing, pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely. Notasulga did cancel with Elwood Christian. Wetumpka has canceled for 2 weeks. And Helena still remains out this week. But the good news is that some people are adding games. Central Coosa had to cancel a game, and they've added Verbena, so they'll be playing this week as well.
Yeah, and then good for Coosa because they've already had a couple of games canceled earlier. They had to cancel, a couple earlier in the season. So they needed a game added, and, glad to see that they'll be able to play against Verbena this week, and it won't count for either of them. But, it would have been a non-region game anyway.
Right.
So
it actually could be a good game, too.
Yeah.
Speaking of good games, we'll jump right in. Thursday night, Jackson-Olin is against Fairfield. That should be a pretty good game coming up after Jackson had a big loss last week.
Yeah, and Jackson-Olin's got a lot of athletes. We visited there last year, and we were watching their ninth grade workout, and we thought it was their varsity team, and they got some big old guys there.
That's a good mistake, yeah.
Yeah, and they got a good team, and it's going to be a really good game with Fairfield. Jackson-Olin's in 6A, Fairfield's in 5A. They're a top 5 team there in 5A. They beat John Carroll last week, who's kind of surprising a lot of people with how they're playing this year, and surprised a lot of people, I think, with how they played in that game against Fairfield last week. So it will be a good non-region matchup between those two this week.
Yeah, and on Friday night, Lafayette hosts Dadeville. Lafayette is off to an 0-3 start, but I think that's a little bit misleading. Dadeville actually is 2-2. Did play on Saturday, though, so they've got a short week. It's sort of a lot of factors going into this game.
Yeah, for Lafayette, you get a bye in the first week, and then you start your season with Randolph County, B.B. Comer, Lanett, and they've all combined to be 11-2 so far. And the only reason there's a 2 there is because B.B. Comer and Lanett had to play each other, so somebody had to get a loss. So
somebody had to lose,
they're 3 pretty good teams, and I think they're going to be a really good challenge for Dadeville. They got a lot of athletes. It's going to be similar to the Pike County game a couple of weeks ago, what they see from an athlete standpoint. So now it'll be interesting to see how Dadeville adjusts from that game and not really playing well against them, now playing against Lafayette this week.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, Lanett, really strong team so far. They're going to host 4A Handley, coming off their big win against Lafayette last week. Can they keep up that momentum against a bigger team in Handley this week? Yeah,
and for Handley, it's been a tough start to their season. They've had 3 different weeks that they hadn't gotten to play games, so they're only 2-0 so far, but they got a really good team. I went there and visited them before the season. They felt really good about what they had coming back for this season, and they're going to be one to really follow when postseason comes around there in 4A, and it's going to be a good challenge there for Lanett at 2A. And, we saw them play against Valley and play them really close, and so I don't think this is going to be too big of a challenge for them. I think that's going to be one of the better games around this area this week.
I'm excited for the 3A matchup of Montgomery Academy versus Montgomery Catholic. It's a non-region game, but both of these teams are sitting pretty well right now at this point in the season.
How crazy is it that they're on the same road in Montgomery and they're in different regions?
Right, and they're basically named the same thing.
But, it's going to be a good game. Montgomery Academy's only allowed 24 points in 4 games total this season, and Catholic is averaging 33.4 points per game. So, and then they play really well on the defense side of the ball. They shut out Dadeville earlier this season, beat them 30-0. So it's going to be a really interesting matchup. Catholic has SEC level athletes running around on their side of the ball, and then Academy has some. I went and interviewed their offensive line. They're huge.
Yeah.
There was one guy who was like 6'4". He swallowed me as I was sitting beside him. So it's going to be a really good matchup between those two. I'm really looking forward to seeing how that game goes, and obviously I think we're going to have a chance to see that one again when postseason rolls around.
Yeah. Speaking of things that are going well, Holtville season is really off to a strong start. They host Marbury this week, and Holtville's offense has looked especially good.
Yeah, another one of those where they're literally like 10 minutes up the road, and they're in different regions from each other. But
good rivalry game.
Yeah, that's now that Holtville's moved up to 5A, that is a good little rivalry now with Holtville and Marbury, and Holtville is scoring points. The only game that they've really struggled is Beauregard, and they just said they just didn't feel like that they showed up and played well. They didn't prepare well that week in practice. Kind of felt like they learned a lot from it, and they beat a really good Talladega team last week that's got really good athletes. So for them now, they'll face Marbury, who's 2-2, and for Marbury, they got to beat somebody good. The 2 wins they have, their teams are combined to be 2-6 right now. So for them, getting a win over a team like Holtville would kind of jumpstart the second half of the season for them, and they're coming off of a year last year that was, probably one of the better years that they've had in football.
I think another game to look at in terms of jumpstarting is Eufaula hosting Stanhope Elmore. Both of these teams have been kind of up and down. It seems like Eufaula gets that big upset, then they lose twice in a row. Stanhope gets some good wins, plays really well against competition, and then loses to an unexpected team. So it's one of those. This could be a really good test for how the rest of the season is going to go for either of these teams.
Well, for Eufaula, their schedule didn't do them any favors. I mean, you go Central Phoenix City, Lee, and Opelika back to back to back. And then they come back and they get a big win this past week, over Park Crossing. So, for them, I think they faced the harder part of their schedule. Now, if they can go and get a win over Stanhope, who, like you said, has been up and down. We saw them dominate Benjamin Russell, and then they turn around and get beat by Pelham, who a lot of people didn't see that happening. So, it's a big game for both teams, and I think for Eufaula, if they can get a win here, you look at the rest of their schedule, and it's set up for them to have a lot of success in the second half of the season heading into postseason play. So it's a big game for both of them just because, it's a 6A game and it's one that we could obviously see later on in the season. I think there's a decent possibility of it.
Another really strong 7A game, Hoover hosts Prattville. Hoover's undefeated on the season. Prattville is at 4-1. So this should be a really competitive game for both teams.
Yeah, I'm pumped about this. This one's the first time that they've played and it's not for a state championship, which is crazy to think about. They're 3-3 against each other, and it's about as even as you can get. At one time, these were the 2 teams in the state of Alabama, and so it's going to be a big one at the Hoover Met, and I'm excited to see how this one goes between these 2 teams. Yeah,
me as well. And so our game of the week is going to be Clay Central hosting Pleasant Grove. Excited for this one, obviously, if it's a rematch of last year's 5A state championship, which was a great game. So if we get more of that, I'll be in for a treat.
Coach Horn said it best earlier in the season. He said, everybody's saying it's a rematch. It's a rematch of the 2 schools. It's not really a rematch of the 2 teams. They lost a ton off that state championship team from a year ago, and Pleasant Grove brings a lot back with Zyquez Perryman coming back. They got the receiver back, and they have a lot of good players. So, to me, going into this game, Clay Central's ranked number 1. They're 5-0, but, Pleasant Grove is a favorite in my mind going into this one. They've got a lot of athletes, and it's going to be a really, really tough game right here. And look, I'm a Danny Horn guy. I played for him. I love Coach Horn, but I think even he would tell you, this is going to be a really, really tall task. Their only loss is to 6A number 1 Oxford, and it was by 1 point on the road to start the season.
No offense to Central Coosa and Verbena, but Danny Horn would tell you that Central Coosa and Verbena would be a really, really tall task.
Yeah.
He's always going to say it's a really tall task. No, but you're right. I think this is the biggest test that they faced so far and will really show if they deserve that number 1 ranking.
Well, they gave up 29 in the first game, and after that, in the last 3, they've given up 7 total points.
Right.
So you got Central Clay coming in scoring 41 a game, and you're going to be in for a treat Friday night. I'm kind of jealous that you're getting to go to that game.
I'm excited for that one. We do also want to mention that Benjamin Russell is hosting its homecoming game versus Smith Station. Really, both of those teams are looking for their first win, but Benjamin Russell obviously wanting to do it at home in front of their homecoming crowd. Sylacauga is headed to Childersburg for a non-region game, but it is a little bit of a rivalry game. So.
Yeah, it's a rivalry game. Sylacauga leads the series 49-21-2, but, it's a big rivalry between those 2 places, and they don't like each other. I know people from both those places, and they really, really don't like each other there. So I think it's going to be a good game on Friday night. And you also got, Phoenix City playing against Opelika as well, which is going to be just a huge matchup between 2 former region foes.
Yeah, so a lot of good games so far for this week. A lot of good games so far, and still a lot to come. So we appreciate you guys tuning in as always, and we'll see you next week.